All right, let's get going again. So if you notice that this part of the video looks a little different, that's because it is. And so the video was filmed in October of 2021, and this is actually May of 2022. So we came back, and the reason being is there's a big rock cut that we're going to go through, and there was all kinds of audio issues in there. I think what happened was some water got into the microphone port and basically plugged up the microphone, so we couldn't really hear the audio properly. It kind of cut in and out. So here what's happening is we're getting into the first of a few rock cuts on this section. Very unusual to see rock cuts here. We are kind of going through kind of an old sort of floodplain river valley. So you're typically not going to see that, but you're going to see kind of a few rock cuts in this area, and there's kind of a little sort of significance to some of the ones that we're going to take a look at. So while we have a minute here, we're going to do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. Canadian Northern got its start in Manitoba in 1896, buying up some small lines and things like that. And their first big project was the construction of a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, and that line was opened in 1902. And following that, they began constructing lines all throughout the prairies, and then eventually started building lines north from Toronto, reaching up into the Sudbury area. So here we kind of left that rock cut behind. We're into yet another rock cut. You can see this one is a little bit bigger. It's probably, the big part of it is probably, I don't know, 10, 12 feet maybe. And so eventually Canadian Northern realized that for their railway line to be, for their railway company to be successful, they would need a transcontinental line. And the problem was that Canadian Northern was not very enthusiastic about building the line between the Sudbury area, specifically Ruel, and Port Arthur. And the reason being is the construction was going to be very difficult, as witnessed by some of the terrain that we're going to be passing through today, and therefore it was going to be very expensive. And so what they did was they explored a lot of options, in particular trying to get a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific, and none of that really kind of panned out. Here you can see the rock cut gets even higher. So here we're probably in the, I don't know, 15 foot, maybe more range, maybe 20 foot range. So they began exploring a lot of options. Unfortunately, none of them sort of panned out. And so eventually Canadian Northern was forced to build. And so again, construction here, you're going to see a tie, actually two ties. And there's a piece of one there. You're going to see some ties in place in this area. They were forced to build. And so again, construction lasted from 1911 to 1914. The last spike was driven on this section on New Year's Day, 1914. And so here's another tie here. Make sure I point my head down. And then you can see three ties here. Again, very unusual to see these. Another one here. And the line was open for traffic in 1915. Now, unfortunately, shortly after the line opened, Canadian Northern began running into financial difficulties, partly because of construction of this section, some of the construction in the mountains of British Columbia, and then a lot of financial stresses associated with World War I. And so by 1917, the company was in some serious financial trouble and had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And a year later, Canadian Northern was forced to merge, amalgamate, whatever descriptor you want to use, with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines known as the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger produced Canadian National Railways. And the nationalization process was completed 3 years later with the absorption of the Grand Trunk lines. So in 1923, the name of this line changed. It had previously been the Nipigon Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway, and it became the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it continued as such. Here you can see another tie. It continued as such until 1960, and in 1960 there was a big reorganization that CN went through. They changed their name from Canadian National Railways, plural, to Canadian National Railway, and adopted their modern worm logo, as people call it. And there was a lot of reorganization they did with a lot of their lines, including this one. So what they did was they merged this line, the Dorion subdivision, with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, and the entire line became known as the Kinghorn subdivision. And that continued to operate until 2005, when CN decided to discontinue service on the line, and then between 2008 and 2010, they removed the rails. So here you can see we're through this very, very large rock cut. It's probably the largest rock cut in the area. We're probably pushing close to 20 feet up there, at least 17, 18 feet. Now, what's interesting about this is this rock cut is actually mentioned in a geological report, or these series of rock cuts here that we've just gone through. So there was a geological report that was published in 1917 that basically covered the area from Long Lac, as it's mentioned in the geological report, which is its original French spelling, all the way to Orient Bay. And it mentions the kind of the presence of gold in the in these rock cuts. I don't know specifically which one. Here you can see there's a piece of telegraph pole. You can see kind of the end piece there with the Armstrong insulator. So if I can find it, I'll flash up that little piece of the geological report. Again, it's fairly lengthy cut. You can certainly see the mineralization in the rocks. And I believe the report says something to the effect of rock cut about a mile to the east, or sorry, to the west of Jellicoe, which is right where we are. And so here you can see the rock cut kind of starts to peter out a bit. All right, so we've arrived at the end of the cut here, and so what we're going to do is we're going to pause, and we're going to continue our westward exploration. We've got a couple of things coming up right there, and you're actually going to click into the original part of the video. So we're back on the bike here, but our time is going to be very, our jaunt here is going to be a little short because we actually have two things right here. We kind of got a 2-for-1 deal. So right here, we actually have a milepost marker. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of cockeyed. It's kind of got turned. It's got itself kind of turned around. Okay, but we can see the marker here, and so this is the milepost 51 marker with, of course, its obligatory bullet holes in it. So again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn subdivision. And so that is marked from Long Lac, so 51 miles from Long Lac. Now for the original lines for the Canadian Northern Railway Nipissing subdivision, and then the Canadian National Railways Dorion subdivision, the mileage is different because the mileage is marked from Jellicoe. And so what we have to do is we have to subtract 49.7 miles. And so basically that becomes milepost 1.3, if I've got that right? So minus 50, add thing, yeah. So milepost 1.3 on the original lines. There actually is a base of a telegraph pole over there. Again, we haven't seen, it's kind of really weird, we haven't seen any telegraph poles. We've seen the bases of them, but not the actual telegraph poles. Now, what we have over here is we have yet another concrete culvert. And this one actually does have a milepost marker. Doesn't really help us because since milepost 51 is right there, that one actually says, and you can see it very, very clearly, it says milepost 51.00. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop down and go take a look at this this rock culvert, because it is really neat. All right, so we made our way down here below the grade. And so what we have here is, as I mentioned, we have one of our neat little rock culverts. I don't know if I can see through to the other side. It's hard for me to get down here. There's all kinds of debris here. There's a bunch of ties that ended up kind of right in the channel here. Looks like there isn't really any water that typically flows through here. Again, you can see the design, so you can see that there's rocks that have been stacked up along the sides, and you can see this big flat piece of rock that's been laid across the top. Again, we don't know exactly, but if I'm a betting man, I'm guessing that this is original construction. We've seen a number of these ones. This is actually pretty good shape. A little bit of the side here is kind of collapsed, but other than that, it's looking not too bad. So we're gonna jump the grade and go take a look at what's happening on the north side. Okay, so we're down here on the north side. The north side is much better defined. However, there is I poke in here. I don't know if I can see the other side. I don't want to bend down because it's soaking wet everywhere. You can see there's some rock that has collapsed in there, so maybe the channel is blocked. But again, you can see the really, really well-defined opening. You can see the big slab of rock that makes up the upper part. You can see there's kind of rock that's been sort of dumped all around here. So again, really, really neat to see these. And again, if they are original construction, a little bit of an added bonus. All right, so we'll jump back up on the grade here and we'll just continue plugging our way along.